Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinzler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I always look forward to these weekly chats. It is so fun to talk gardening.
It is. It's great, and we not only we talking gardening, we're talking gardening with an old friend of yours, a new friend of mine, somebody we had on earlier this summer, Mary Holm.
Yeah, and we're excited to have you back again, Mary.
Welcome back.
Our discussion was so interesting last time. We thought, well, gosh, we need to get together again.
Well, it just worked out very well. Thank you, you guys.
Well, so Mary, people may know you from Prairie Yard and Garden, but if they haven't seen that show yet on PBS, or it's PBS, it is PBS, right? It's public broadcasting. Tell us a little bit about the show. Tell the listeners a little bit about the show.
We do 13 episodes every year, and then we use those episodes, and they will start actually airing on Thursday, January 18th, and they air locally on the Thursday evening, but they're also put on YouTube at about noon that same day, so people can watch the episodes anywhere. And so then we do the 13 episodes, and then they start over. They've been recorded, and we just finished doing our last show probably about 2 weeks ago, and it was on hemp. And I knew nothing about growing hemp, and so we went out to this field, and it was so interesting. They grow their hemp for human products, human care products, animal pet care products. And so it was really, really a fun show to do for me because I learned so much. And when I came home, I could still smell the hemp on me when I came home, but it was so fun to do.
Oh, I bet that would have been fascinating.
Oh, it's going to be a great show. People are going to enjoy that, and I hope, like me, we'll learn a lot from it, too.
And for people who haven't seen it, Don, you were a guest on there about a year ago, right?
Oh, that was fun. And your programs, the archive and everything is so easily found. You know, a person just has to search Prairie Yard and Garden, and there they are. And it is so fascinating to go back because so many of your episodes are evergreen. They're, I mean, not evergreen like a pine or a spruce, but evergreen in that gardeners will find them useful for years after they're aired.
And that is intentional. If I get a little carried away and I'll say, oh, you know, this year in 2021 or 2023, the guys will go, no, and they'll edit that out just so that it can be used.
So it's not dated
years.
because the information provided and just the inspiration is, like I say, evergreen, can be used for many, many years.
And how long have you been doing the show?
Since 2014 that I've been, but now we just finished recording the 37th year, the 37th season. So it's been around for a long time.
That's great. And it's great to have that kind of that resource. And for what Don and I do, you know, with the podcast, what Don does with the columns, it's nice to see it's nice to see moving pictures, images of like that. And you give great tours of gardens and things like that, you know, while we can paint a picture and Don can show a couple pictures in his column, it's nice to be able to see the scope and to see that moving through a space and how you take that in as a viewer, how you take in a garden or a landscape, something like that.
And because the way you guys do it, it's us viewers can put ourselves right there in that place. So those are very nice episodes.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we try to strive for, is to give people ideas of what they can do and maybe how they can do it themselves. And we try to we have 3 different segments. We try to do 4 shows on the industry and 4 shows with private homeowners, and then 4 shows with like extension people, and then 1 we try to do kind of with arts and cultural heritage a year. And so that in itself brings in a lot of diversity on the shows.
Well, so, you know, we're talking about gardens now as we're recording this. It's winter. Gardening is over, but let's catch up. How did your garden grow, as they say, Mary?
It was really, really, I was probably quite Mary contrary, because it was so dry, but luckily we could water most of our flowers in the pots up by the house. So those turned out really nice. And then the things out far away from the house, carry water or run a hose and kept them going. So some of the things probably struggled because it was so dry, and you had that here too.
We did.
And but for the most part, it ended up being a pretty good season again.
Yeah, I think most of us agreed, that, it was hotter, drier than we would have liked. But all in all, I was satisfied with it. We had food to eat and beauty to be seen.
Well, Tom and I just finished our last cantaloupe from the garden this week.
Oh, wow.
And
how did you keep it that long?
We have a real cool garage.
Uh-huh.
And so then...
it's stored that long.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I brought them into we have a fridge downstairs and put them there. And yeah, it was a little bit soft, but it still tasted great. And we still have tomatoes in the garage. In fact, I brought some along up for our family from this spring. I thought for the longest time, we're not going to get many tomatoes this year. And it was all of a sudden, it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all these tomatoes?
Well, and then because it was so warm in the fall, and they just kept growing. If you had some kind of indeterminate plants, the sun sugars were still growing. And,
you're right.
Though they just kept. And we were wondering, like, well, when should we pull them up? We're like, well, we'll keep them going
they're
for
still
a while.
producing.
Yeah, they're still producing. It's still nice to look at, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
What were some of your other big successes this year?
Well, I don't know if you do, but Tom Kolb out at Bismarck in Extension, he offers seed trials, and you can order the seeds and then you report back on how things did. And so I tried the squash, and I tried the cantaloupe, and I tried the watermelon, and I tried cucumbers out of those trials. And that's so fun to do those and see how the things did.
Yeah, Tom Kolb is the NDSU Extension horticulturist specialist, one of them for the state. He's located in Bismarck. And one of the things he does is offers trials, primarily vegetables, a few flowers, trials each year. Trials sent out to gardeners who request it. And then those are the trials that he uses, the results that gardeners send back. Those are the results that he uses to determine which are the best varieties for the upper Midwest here. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you participated in those.
So what kind of squash were the seeds for? Do you remember?
So there's usually two types. He sends kind of two types for you to evaluate which of the two types. And then it's interesting. He usually sends a little stake along so that you keep track of which one was which.
It's very organized.
Yeah,
that's
very
great.
organized. And then asks a person to send back the feed back and etc. And yeah, so sometimes they might be names of like squash that aren't familiar.
Right.
And,
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so they might be brand new ones. And so it's not surprising if you don't remember them, that would be surprising if you did.
I hadn't tried either one. I remember and they were zucchini.
Okay.
And one of them was Duda, and the other one was, I think, something or other green. And both were very good. I think I liked the Duda a little bit higher because you have to score them and you keep track on foliage and production and when they produce and how long they produce and overall yield and your own. So it's just fun to do, and I really recommend it for any gardeners.
Yeah, we'll have to do a podcast about that in the spring when it's the time that that you request to become part of that. It's really neat. We'll have to do a podcast on that, John. Thinking about that, that's a really, I love that idea. But when you said for any gardener, I'm thinking like, for my yard's not terribly big. You probably, especially for squash, maybe you may need a fair amount of space or some space, I guess. But he does things like carrots. Oh, sure. Okay. So maybe different things, or lettuce or different things. And maybe that's things that you're growing anyway. And well, gosh, maybe it'd be fun. I can contribute to testing a few of these things. And, most gardeners, you tested quite a few things that sound like Mary. Many gardeners would choose a couple of things to test. Oh, that is fun. Okay, I like that idea. We'll do a podcast on it, John. That'd be great. Well, we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back with Mary, we're going to be talking about wintering plants inside.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
So we're back. We're talking with Mary Holm. And so, Mary, let's talk about what we are in winter. We've established that. We all know that. But what are you doing for wintering gardening? I mean, are you bringing plants indoors? Are you growing inside? What are you doing this winter?
Oh, yes. We bring a lot of plants in. In fact, I've been somewhat threatened by my husband, Tom, that if I bring more plants in, I'm going to have to move out because there is a limited amount of space. And so we do put a lot of things out for the summer. And so then when we bring them in, then a lot of times we'll take them and set them in our garage, which is heated to 40 degrees. And it's kind of a little bit of a transition. Plus, if there's any critters that come along in, because we did have a good friend and she brought in a good-sized pot, and a few days later, she just about had a heart attack because here there was a toad hopping across her house in the kitchen floor, and it had come in, buried in one of her pots, and she didn't see it because it was dug down in there, and she had a devil of a time catching it, but she moved it outside so it would be safe and sound. But so no, bringing it in is easy, and Tom usually treats them with a systemic insecticide to help lessen the number of pests that we bring in.
Now, do you keep these plants, you mentioned you bring them into the garage. Do you keep them in the garage all winter?
No.
Okay.
It's just like until we have time to carry them upstairs. And then I like to wash them with soapy water and soapy water. I'll take some mild dish soap and put them into my scrub bucket, and then I'll wash the leaves, and that in itself washes off maybe any aphids or any spider mites, and they just really enjoy a nice bath. And then sometimes throughout the winter, I might take them and carry them into the bathtub and run the shower over the top of them too, to just give them another bath, wash off the dust.
So after you bring the plants into the garage and kind of get the insects again washed up and everything, where do you go from there in the house? What type of windows, or where do you move them?
We are blessed to have a house that has a beautiful south patio door.
Oh, nice.
And so then in the wintertime, we don't get a chance to go out on the patio very much or grill or anything, so that I can have that whole spot for plants. And so we do have them stacked on different levels. And so then they come in there, and we not only have a south window, but we also have a nice big west window. So the kitchen and the living room both actually get quite a bit of light. And so then they survive. They're pretty good.
Yeah, well, what types of plants do you bring in?
I usually take coleus cuttings, and those are the easiest things in the world.
And John, you've done coleus.
Well, when you said easiest, and this is the first year I'm doing this. So I took cuttings and I put them directly into a small pot with fresh soil, but I'm not sure they seem still very moist downstairs, and so I'm wondering if I'm doing something wrong. And I've got a grow light above them, but I don't know if I overwater them. So we'll see. This is the first year, and I can't expect 100% success, but so we'll see. I think I've still got sweet potato vines that are still doing pretty well, and a couple of other begonias, T-Rex. So I think that those seem to be doing okay. But some of the coleus are maybe not doing so well. So we'll see. So how do you do them?
Well, I take, it depends on how much time I have and what I have available. And this year it was pretty darn close to the frost. So I just went out and I snipped them and I put them into a couple of jars of water. I mean, So you wrote them for you, make sure they come up with roots first. I did.
Maybe I should have done that.
And I've done that. But I've also done what you did, is put them into soil. And you know what works really good is you can go to a certain place that has ice cream. And if they've got these little kind of like a blizzard cup that's got a little dome on it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Well, if you get one of those and then you take it home and you wash it afterwards, you can do your cuttings in there, and then it's almost like a little terrarium.
That is brilliant.
That's a great idea.
Because then they don't even wilt down. They just kind of...
Sure. Super idea.
And then after a while, you can see the roots coming out to the side.
And then they've also got there's ventilation with it because there's an opening on top, so they won't be cooking.
Yeah.
Because I think we probably discussed how roots that form in a media tend to get adjusted better when you transplant them. The coleus roots so easily in water, and so that's kind of easy and handy. But for some things, you put yours, John, directly kind of in a media potting mix to get them to root. But your idea of, Mary, of using that little domed lid, like creating a little greenhouse over the cutting, might have helped those root, John.
Yeah. Next year.
Yeah.
But I have a neighbor.
Do you keep the mother plant too of the coleus, or do you just root cuttings and then go from there?
I do keep one as a house plant, and then just kind of in case I screw up and they don't root, which has never happened. But I do keep one as a house plant, and then I start some more each fall when I bring some in. And then in about February, I really get busy and take cuttings off of the cuttings and off the one that I've maintained.
So one plant can yield many, many.
It's true because our garden club, we need a lot of plants because we do a scholarship auction.
So like a plant sale or auction? Sure.
And then I need 12 each year for the pots at our place. So I do. So on Valentine's Day, that's when I take that batch of cuttings, and they're always just beautiful then for spring. So
off that one cutting that you take in the fall, how many by the springtime? How many plants will you have growing from that one cutting? If you take subsequent cuttings from that one cutting?
Oh, I would guess about 16 to 20 because they just grow so easily, and they're wonderful. And I think this variety that I have was given by a friend, and so it's just a way to kind of continue. I think of her every time that I take those cuttings and grow them and see them. It's a way to just tie into people that you are friends and that you've known.
And coleus, to me, one of the reasons I love them too, there's such a great splash of color, and especially in winter. And I think for a lot of people, traditional houseplants, they're green, but coleus, you can have these vibrant splashes of color. And they are so much.
Because when I think of my grandma's dining room window actually on the south side, and when I think of the plants, they didn't have garden centers to go to buy things. So when I think of the ones, I think coleus, she always had a coleus growing in the wintertime. So John, like you said, that splash of color, she always had geraniums, of course, and maybe a few ivies or so. So it's interesting. The plants that they wintered inside were also plants that grew as house plants during that time too.
Mm-hmm. And then I do bring in bulbs. I do bring in some of the bulbs, gladiolas and calla lilies and canna lilies. I don't think you can kill a canna lily because they just are so easy to bring in.
No, a common question people have is, okay, when you bring in those cannas, we generically call lots of these things bulbs, but I think, canna roots are probably large rhizomes. But anyway, a common question is, what's the best way to winter those? Because, of course, they're wintered dormant and they need it cool. So how do you winter yours? Whereabouts?
That is the easiest thing in the world. I go down to the grocery store and they have these big boxes that they sell these jugs of water in, so they're heavy duty. And I get a couple of those, and then we dig out the cannas before a frost. Well, either before a frost or shortly thereafter. Sure. And then we cut them off so that the stem is maybe about 3 inches, and then we dig them out with a big shovel because they always have these huge roots. Yeah, and we just take that whole part, we let it dry down for a few days, and then we just take it and put it in these nice big boxes, and they go into our garage, which stays at about 40 degrees over the winter. And I don't put them on the floor because that's a little bit cool on the cement. And so Tom has built a little shelf. And so they sit in that box on that shelf all winter long.
And 40 degrees is about the recommended, isn't
yeah,
it? Sure.
mhm. And so
Do you
they're.
put anything around them so that they don't dry out, or do you find they're okay?
I leave the soil on them,
Leave the soil on, sure.
on the cannas.
Yeah, and then that prevents them from drying
Drying
out and
out.
withering up during the
Yeah.
winter.
And I brought glad bulbs in, and I put those into an old onion bag, or you can buy
'Cause they like it
oranges.
dry, good and
Yeah.
dry, but also cool.
And I didn't let them dry enough. And so I do check them every once in a while to make sure they're not rotting. And so I opened the box and I thought, I smelled them, and you can kind of smell. You
Yeah,
can
if there's
kind
kind
of
of a moldy,
or
humidity,
wet
moldy,
soil.
wet
Yeah,
soil
earthy.
smell.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
earthy, good. And I thought, these are too wet. So I took them back out and dried them another couple of weeks just in the garage in a box. And now they're doing fine. Then I packaged them up again.
So it's interesting the different things we can overwinter, like the dormant type bulbs or corms or canna rhizomes, and then the things that we winter as growing plants, like the geraniums and coleus that we mentioned.
Yeah,
So,
talk a little bit about how you do a geranium.
yeah, the geraniums. Do you do geraniums? Do you bring them indoors?
I don't. No, because you do a much better job at that. So you address that.
You know, what I always mention is, okay, we're talking about overwintering these plants, wintering them in. And for me, we talked about taking coleus cuttings. To me, it's not about getting plants on the cheap. It's because we're saving money by wintering all these things, and that gives me more money to buy other things at the garden centers.
Yep.
So I'm not just trying to get by cheap. But anyway, so geraniums, we winter quite a few. We winter about 50, which go in our outside planters each year. And so 50 geraniums, what we do is before frost in the fall, we take cuttings from the tips and we root those in a good peat sand mixture. They root quite nicely. Not 100%. There's always some that kind of rot. But anyway, then we don't throw the mother plants out either. We lift those up out of the pots that they're in. And okay, to winter 50 of them, we don't want this big mother plant because I don't have space to do 50 big mother plants. So what we do is lift those mother plants out of the pots, shake all the soil off, and cut them back to 2 to 3 inches above soil level. And most of the leaves are gone. And the roots, I trim them a little bit, and then I put them back into a 4.5-inch pot. That's the customary size that the greenhouses sell them in. So basically what I'm doing is reducing that plant back to the size kind of that one would buy it at. And geraniums tolerate that well. So then I take all these 50 geraniums and put them pot to pot under fluorescent lights in the basement, and pretty soon they sprout, and you've got beautiful little geraniums. Pretty soon they're nice and husky, and within maybe 2 months, they're back to the size of the ones you would buy at a garden center. And then they continue to grow during winter. But by March, from March, they're good size. And if you kept it going until May, they're going to be too big. And then you set a big geranium outside and they get sunburned, windburned, and all that. So about March, I cut them back again down to 2 to 3 inches and force them to regrow. And then by May, they're of a size and quality just like you'd buy at a garden center. Now, other people have other ways. Geraniums can go semi-dormant. You could put them in maybe in your 40-degree garage. They'll kind of just go dormant. The leaves might kind of wither, fall off. And then about March, cut them back, move them to your sunny window, and they'll start growth again.
So I got a question.
So different ways.
Maybe I missed this, but so you said that you take cuttings in the beginning when you pull your geraniums inside. So you still overwinter the mother plant, and then what do you do with the cuttings then? Because you have all these other, you still have the mother plant to go back into the pot.
Well, you're very sharp, John. So, okay, I need 50 geraniums to go back out again. And so I'm wintering the mother plants. But I'm also taking cuttings because there were all these nice tip cuttings. I don't want to waste those. So I probably have another 50 cuttings. And then after they root, they go into these same 4.5-inch pots. And by March, April, May, they're nice size greenhouse quality geraniums. So all of a sudden, instead of 50, I've got 50 plus 50, I've got 100 geraniums. And so I've had to use restraint because
this is a gardener's dilemma, restraint.
Because I have over the course of a year or so, I've all of a sudden developed about 200 geraniums growing in the basement. That was too much. So anyway, every year, I replace some of those mother plants because you could keep wintering a geranium for many years. I remember at a gardening talk, a lady said she's kept the same geranium for 40 years. She was in her 80s, and you can. But the geraniums tend to get kind of woody on the stalks, and so after a mother plant has become maybe 3-4 years, I cycle some of them out. The woodiest ones, I use some of the fresh cutting-grown geraniums to replace some of the woodiest ones. And some of the woodiest ones might not always come back as good.
And when you say woody, for people like me who are maybe newer to gardening, what do you mean, like a thicker stalk or a thicker stem?
A geranium stalk, fresh geranium stalk stem is greenish. And then as they age, they become more of a brown, more like almost a bark on them, and they can develop some rots and different things, and so they become less vigorous maybe. And so that's why I always take cuttings, so I'll have some fresh ones to replace some of these older ones where the stalks are kind of getting just gnarly. And that's a good gardening. Is that a botanical
gnarly?
I know just what you mean. So
anyway, that's why I always take some cuttings. So I've got some fresh ones to cycle in.
Well, excellent. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about more overwintering plants with Don and Mary.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're with Mary Holm talking about overwintering plants. And while we were on break, we brought up a good point about geraniums. Mary, what was that one?
When you bring them in, maybe be sure not to water them too much. We don't have a lot of good light in the wintertime just because we live up here in the Northland. And so the plants are not actively growing. They're kind of resting for the winter. And so be careful not to overwater. And like the succulents, that's important, geraniums, and really a lot of the plants. You want to kind of back off and maybe don't fertilize a lot in the wintertime because we just want the plants to be able to kind of sit back and relax and then get ready to grow again when the days start getting longer.
And Mary, I've really noticed that with the geraniums that we winter, that even though they're growing under the fluorescent lights, it's a different atmosphere than when they're outside. Mm-hmm. Outside you got the air movement and the wind and everything, and they dry out and you need to make sure they're well watered. But it's totally different, isn't it, indoors? They don't have that air movement in most cases, and they're in our case, under fluorescent or LED lights, so they don't have maybe the intensity. And I can louse things up a lot quicker if I keep them too wet. I've really noticed. So I tend to err on the dry side a little bit because, like you said, these plants slow down and they aren't requiring as much moisture, and so we can probably do more damage if we keep them too wet rather than too dry.
I tell a lot of people that in the wintertime, my plants survive in spite of me because I really don't water them very much at all. And then usually as the days start getting longer in February, we pick up the pace together then.
Well, Don and I recently did a show. We were talking about houseplants. And for me, somebody who's newer to this, the one thing that I kind of not necessarily dreaded, but that was always imposing is when you have a friend or a family member going out of town who says, "Can you take care of my plants?" And that idea that you tend to overwater because you're so afraid that they're going to die.
Yeah.
And so that notion of, yes, that plants survive, in spite of you. You were talking about a plant that I'd not heard of. Clivia. Talk about clivia, and that's one that you bring in.
That is one that we bring in, and we've had that plant for, I'll bet you, 25, close to 30 years probably. We were given it as a gift when we lived a long time farther someplace else, and so we put that out in the summertime. It is a cousin of the amaryllis. It's in the amaryllis family, and unlike
describe it to us a little bit.
Okay. Most people are familiar with amaryllis, and they have these nice leaves, nice real green leaves.
Kind of a strap-like
Yes.
leaf.
The clivia is even more so like that, and it doesn't go into a dormancy. It doesn't die down. The leaves are bright, deep green, and probably a good 1.5 inches wide. And that, and then it blooms a lot of times in the summertime. For us, usually Easter to summer sometime.
Does it still have the same kind of bell-shaped flower like amaryllis?
It has a cluster of flowers.
Oh, what color?
They have different colors. Ours is orange.
Nice.
And so it'll send up the stalk and all of a sudden have these star-shaped flowers, a whole big clump. They are stunning. And like when they're blooming, our neighbor asks, "What is that color over there at your place?" But and so they're very, very beautiful. And it's a native of South Africa, so it won't take the winter at all. And so we bring it in, and that one is one that, we'll treat so it doesn't have spider mites. And then when it comes in, it gets its bath with soapy water, and then it sits in the corner until spring and goes out again. So
I don't have one, but I want one.
Yes.
I can get you one because
that'd be
ours
awesome.
needs dividing, but you shouldn't divide them a lot because they like to be crowded in the pot.
Sure.
And they've got these huge roots that, and sometimes they get so pot bound that they'll lift themselves up out of the pot. And ours is probably at close to that stage now. And so then what we'll do, it gets a whole bunch of little babies off to the side, and some of them are really big, and you can only get a pot so big, that you can still carry. And so we do need to divide ours, and I will get you a plant.
Well, that'd be awesome. I think last time I saw one was years ago in the NDSU tropical greenhouse. They had one beautiful one blooming. Now, if memory serves, are those also called the Kaffir lily?
They are.
Kaffir?
Kaffir, I think, yes.
Kaffir lily.
But we have a friend from South Africa, and Tom and I always called it that. And then one time she said, "Mary and Tom, you shouldn't be calling that because in South Africa, that's a very derogatory term. And it's probably like ours saying the N-word here. And so since then, we're not being hotsy-totsy by saying clivia. We're just trying to be...
Oh, that's fascinating.
A lot of... So, these things that we don't know.
Yeah.
And so we have this clivia, and we just really love it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about light and how much light you say you've got these great patio doors that kind of works for you. Don, we've talked about, sometimes using grow lights, but do you also, because of the patio doors, do you rotate plants through there so that everyone kind of gets a little time in the light, or how do you do that? And what do you do for light in the winter? Because he's saying, it's you kind of make do with what you've got.
You guys will laugh at this, but we control the light by which direction we pull the curtains open. Okay. So we can go one way, and then the ones over on the left side will get their light, and then we pull them the other way the next day. And it's really a high class outfit at our place. Yes, there you go. And then a few years ago, we had a friend who had a shelving unit that her husband had built for her with lights. And when he passed away, she was going to throw that shelving unit away. Well, it came to our place.
Sure.
And
gardeners don't want to waste anything.
You are so right. And so then it went out in the garage, and it has fluorescent lights. It has 3 tiers of fluorescent lights in it. And so we use that for starting plants, especially the succulents in the wintertime. And so we can kind of control the lights themselves. Tom put a plastic around the outside and a little door on one end so we can open it. And just the plastic with the fluorescent lights keeps it quite nice. And but if we need supplemental heat, then he's got a little milk house heater down in one corner that he set up. But usually the fluorescent lights will keep it warm enough in there.
Sure. And of course, the whole the whole plant light scenario is in a state of flux. There are so many different options now, plant lights, LED lights. And so I think many of us gardeners who use supplemental lights are still searching for really the kind of the latest or the best.
Yeah. Do you have preference on your lights, or have you experimented with different kinds of lights, or do you still just stay with fluorescence?
We just, because that's what was in there and that's what we've used. And the lights are on a chain.
Yep.
And so then we can lower them.
Yeah, that's what we do as well. Yeah.
And so we can do that. And it's worked okay for us.
And I used fluorescence for years. I've switched to LED. Just because, a little more energy efficient. And I'm using just plain LED like you would use in a shop light. And so I'm testing those to see if plants grow as well under those as they might a plant light. And so I'm sometime going to try, my LED, just shop type bulbs versus a plant light. The special spectrum adjusted plant lights, and see just how they compare. Because this whole plant light thing is really evolving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With the red waves and the blue waves and everything. But isn't that just like a bunch of us plant people sitting here about, isn't it fun to try these things?
It is.
Well, then again, like we've been saying too, like in the middle of winter, why not? You got to keep yourself occupied, and why not give yourself something that you enjoy doing and that you can, that you're learning from. You can't necessarily get your hands so dirty and quite dig in the dirt, out in the yard, but you can still be experimenting, and you can still be trying different things, and to see also, because then what will you do next winter?
Exactly. And, the time does go. All of a sudden, the winter passes, when you do some of these things, occupy your mind as to which of these plant lights is going to work better. And pretty soon seed catalogs come out, and we're wintering plants indoors and making sure they're doing good and looking at them. And yeah, the time goes.
You were talking a little bit earlier about when you bring plants in and you wash them, and then you also use like a little insecticide too. Like what kind of issues with insects have you had? I mean, or what kind of things are you looking out for?
Spider mites is probably my number one pain in the tush, because they like plants so much. And so that's why we wash them. And aphids are another one that you have to be real careful for. Mealy bugs can be an issue. Somebody gave us a gift a few years ago, and the next thing you know, there were some mealy bugs. And that's a good idea and part of why we keep the plants out in the garage, so they don't contaminate everything that's inside.
So we can kind of watch them for
exactly,
a little bit,
isolate
observe.
them. Mm-hmm. Yep. And just make sure that we don't have any extra friends that we bring into the house.
You mentioned spider mites. They're so obnoxious because they're almost invisible.
Yeah.
You can't. You really can't see them with the naked eye if they're on a leaf, and you oftentimes don't know they're present until their population has ballooned to a point where they're adversely affecting the plant, and then sometimes it's. Yeah, you could treat it, but sometimes the plant has so suffered. And so, they're one of my most obnoxious little insects. Aphids are annoying too, but at least you can kind of see the little either whitish or greenish or brownish. You can at least see them kind of up in the axils of the plant or under the leaves. And mealybugs they're terrible, but at least we're trying to find good insects here, but at least mealybugs, you can see the cottony growth. But boy, sometimes some of these things get established, they're hard.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned systemic insecticide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that one of the granular type that you apply?
Yep. Tom applies that. Tom is does such a great job. He applies that to the soil. For anything that we're planning to bring in, probably about 2 weeks ahead. And you can get that at a hardware store or at a greenhouse.
Yeah, and it's called houseplant systemic insecticide. Yeah, so it's well labeled.
Yep. And so he just follows that according to label directions and puts that in, works it around. And so then when you water the plant, takes that up. And then any of these little sucking insects, like the spider mites
and mealybugs and aphids.
Yeah. Then when they feed on that, then that kills them. And so it's a good way to get rid of them. And then my bath helps a lot too, just washing them off. And you always see the webbing on those darn little spider mites you'll see the webbing on the plants. And
are there special types of plants that you notice are more prone to insects?
The ivies, I think, are notorious. It's like an English ivy, a German ivy. Aphids like the German ivy.
Right.
And I don't do the mandevilla.
Yeah, mandevilla, we've wintered one for years. That always gets spider mites.
Okay.
We have to watch just religiously, and aphids.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, geraniums, for some reason, are somewhat, maybe it's because they have such a kind of an aromatic foliage.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't like the fragrance of that. And insects don't seem to bother geraniums as
You're
much.
right. I've noticed the same thing. I don't think that you might get some disease issues there, but
Right.
the insects, I think, they don't like them. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, any other winter gardening projects that you've got coming up or anything like that?
Well, I'm going to be starting to take succulent cuttings or break off the succulents, and there's a lot that the plants themselves, some of the little leaves they have fallen down, and I've noticed that they're rooting right in the containers, and so then I'll probably transplant those. And what I like to do is take a egg carton, like a styrofoam egg carton, put a little bit of soil in each cell, and so then you can grow 12 little succulents in a whole small space, and then later on when they get a bigger root system, then you can transplant them when you have time and when you have more space. And so those are easy.
How deeply do you bury the cut surface or the broken off surface of the succulent? How far down do you go with those? Sometimes I've had a hard time. You don't want to bury them too deep, but then they'll topple out.
Well,
what do you do?
A lot of the succulents, I had a lady show me this, that like a little spear, or don't put it down in the ground, lay it on top. And just laying it on top and the humidity from misting or watering, then they will form a root in a new plant.
And then the roots will find its way down.
Yep.
Sure.
So just lay it sideways rather than sticking it in. But there are some that have like a nice crown, and then all the rest back to the soil level have gotten ugly and everything. So I will sometimes cut those off and stick those in, maybe a half inch or so. But then they don't topple because they've got this nice.
Sure. I'll have to try the egg carton method.
Well, it's a nice way to do it. And a lot of them I just missed. I don't water them heavily anyhow, so I missed them. And I've got a project this year.
What's that?
I got an air plant.
Okay.
Last summer. And so I've never had an air plant before. And so this has been a fun thing to do. And our daughter had given us a glass container. And so Tom and I filled that with moss. And then we put the air plant into it, and we took some fish line and put it around the bottom so that the air plant can't fall out. And so then every so often, about every Friday morning, I missed the air plant, and she just seems as happy as can be. And then a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month, when it was still warm and we were getting that rain, I took and I set it out on the patio on a coffee table. They bloom. It's got a bloom shoot that's coming out. No color yet. They're in the same family as bromeliads, and so that's kind of what this little tube that's coming up looks like.
I'm amazed at the power of rain, of natural rainfall. I'm just amazed.
I know. And so, of course, she came back in as soon as the sun came out, because they don't like a lot of sun. And so she came back in the house, but I think she got enough cool temperatures and humidity and rain, and she was just happy as a lark. So it's just fun to grow plants.
Well, so anything else that you guys want to talk about? We're talking about winter overwintering plants. Anything that we've missed out on?
Oh, I forgot to say that on some of my bulbs that I brought in, I sprinkled them with sulfur.
Oh,
and you can buy that at
you sprinkled the raw bulb with sulfur or the soil? Okay,
the bulb.
okay.
You can roll it in or you can sprinkle it. I sprinkled it, and you can get that at a garden center. A friend that I know, they have hundreds of dahlias, and so he went to the elevator and got sulfur, which is used for fertilizer in the fields. And then he used an old coffee grinder and ground it up. And so he had a lot for a cheap price. I don't need that much. So I just got some, and I sprinkled it on because that's a good fungicide.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Oh, that's great.
So bulb dust is mostly like a sulfur product,
Sure.
I think. And so that's another little thing that people can do to help overwinter their bulbs and corms is
So you were saying that Prairie Yard and Garden, the new season will start in January.
mhm.
Give us a little sneak peek. Do you remember where you'll be going, where you'll be taking us this year? If you could just offer us a little sneak peek at some of the episodes.
Well, here in Fargo, in the station here, I think you have the shows that were aired last year on the
Okay.
TV. And so you'll have Don's show
Okay.
coming up this year. But people can watch the new shows too on YouTube.
Okay.
And did you know that we have a Shakespeare garden in South Dakota?
No.
Where at?
In Wessington Springs, South Dakota.
Well, that sounds like a Shakespearean town almost. Yeah. So where's that town? I have no idea.
It's
I
a
don't either.
little town, and I think it was probably about two and a half hours west of Watertown. It took us a long time to get there, but there used to be a college there, Wessington Springs College, and it was a religious-run college, and the professor and his wife, that were both professors there, went over to England, and she saw Shakespeare's home. And when she came back, they built a replica of Anne Hathaway's house, Shakespeare's wife. And so at the college, and then the college has closed, and all the buildings are gone except the Anne Hathaway house. And then there were Shakespeare gardens that are built around the house, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Who maintains it?
They have some garden people, and they might be master gardeners, and just people in the community that maintain it. They have a lot of zinnias. They harvest the zinnia seeds and use them from year to year and keep the colors even separate and then plant it. And when I was there were monarchs everywhere.
I'm looking forward to that episode.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating.
And then they built some of the things that are like in the Shakespeare gardens over in England.
Because I've got a picture in my head, so I'm curious to see. Then I want to see this episode to see if what's in my head is what it appears like. This is going to be fascinating.
I had no idea that this was there, and the lady there was a lady who is the chamber president or Chamber of Commerce. She heads that, and her mother is a fan of Prairie Yard and Garden, and so she bugged her daughter from the chamber office until she called me and told me about it. And so then I said, yep, we're coming to visit.
Oh, great.
And it was great. I think people will really enjoy it. It's so unique. And there's a lady near Morris who has created a monarch way station. I don't know if people know what those are, but when the monarchs are traveling all the way from Canada back to Mexico, then it's a good thing to have plants planted. And so you can do that. You can actually get a designated way station And so she has done that.
So the monarchs stop there on their way.
And they can fuel up with the plants that they love.
Oh, wow.
And so they're called monarch way stations.
So it's
awesome.
I mean, I used to drive trucks. So a weigh station for me is where you pull in and you get weighed to make sure. But this is probably a weigh, W-A-Y, like along the way. But like, so it's refueling.
Yeah.
I love that.
Exactly.
Stop.
Yep, exactly. And there's lots of them in Minnesota and Wisconsin and a lot of other states. But you can actually get a sign that says this is a monarch way station. And it doesn't have to be big. 10 by 10, I think, is the minimum size they allow. And
that would be fun to see. I wonder if many monarchs at a time, I picture thousands of monarchs stopping in at this way station, kind of like a wayside rest along the highway. You might see many, many cars. I wonder if many monarchs at a time.
The lady, the lady started one a couple of years ago, and she's been so happy with that she's expanded it and made another garden now. And so I asked her, and she said, "Oh yeah, she gets quite a few." I don't know. Everybody's definition of quite a few is different. But anyhow, that's going to be the kickoff show.
Be fun episodes.
Mm-hmm. And then we did one on sustained natural fertilizer, which is an organic type of fertilizer, and did a great show on hostas, and that one is going to be good. And then there's a lady from Alberta, Minnesota, who she uses old farm stuff, things that she finds, a chandelier. She's got that out wonderful in her garden. She's done ladders, old ladders, and she's made fences out of ladders. That's a good one, too. You'll enjoy that. Then we went to a vineyard, and then we did the Shakespeare garden. This will take too long to explain, but there's cherry wood at down in Baxter, Minnesota, and it's a quilt shop, and each year they do a cherrywood exhibit, and this year it's geared to monarchs, since monarchs were placed on the endangered list. And so people do quilt squares and send them in with something to do with monarchs. You should see the things that people have made. They are fascinating. And it's not made into a big quilt, but they're quilt squares. I think they're 20 by 20 or something like that. But, that's beyond me, And so we did one on CSA with Ryan Pesch, and I think he's the extension person in Moorhead. And he has a CSA at Detroit Lakes and in that area. Oh, that was fun to see his place. And we did one on the hemp that I talked about before. And then, they always say, Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. It's actually 11,842. But we
typical Minnesota to sell itself short.
Right. Yeah.
But we talk about water quality and why that's so important to maintain the wonderful lakes and water resources. And so,
wow, I think that's great.
That's an awesome schedule.
Exactly. It's a great lineup. And especially coming out in January, we talked a little bit about this, but like that, here we'll get through the holidays and that'll fuel us through. It'll keep us occupied. But then you get to January, especially like that first week, and you kind of look around, you're like, I want to get outside.
Yes.
I want to start with, that's usually when we start planning our gardens. We start looking up YouTube. We start watching gardening videos on YouTube and start.
Seed catalogs are out.
Seed catalogs are out. We're gonna do a podcast about that.
I can't wait to see these episodes.
Oh, well, I think you'll enjoy them, and they're easy to find. If you even just go to Prairie Yard and Garden YouTube, you can find them, and then you can even go back into the archived ones too, and real easy.
I found it really easy to search for all these.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm excited about your new season.
Good. Well, thanks for letting me come and talk about it, too.
Well, Mary, it's always a treat. And I got to say, it's just literally a treat because last time you were on, we talked about how this was such a great conversation. It was like having a pot of coffee and a pie in the middle.
We need pie.
So then Mary comes today, unbeknownst to us, and brings in kuchen. And not only kuchen, fresh made kuchen from yesterday. And you got together with your family how many kuchen did you make?
We did 86. We did 2 batches. The first one was 44 and the second one was 42.
And so how long did it take to make 86 kuchen?
The first one went into the oven at 10 and we finished at about 4 o'clock.
And so, I mean, not that your gardening production is that in and of itself is amazing to me. But then on top of that you guys are so productive to bake kuchens, 86 kuchens in less than a work day. Yes. And then to deliver. So when we sign off here, we're going to dig in and have a little kuchen here for breakfast.
I'm not usually anxious to sign off because I love our conversations, but today, but it was, these conversations are so, it's like sitting around the table. Yeah. And all the listeners are here with us, and it is so awesome. So yeah, we're literally going to have that treat. We're literally going to have that pie-like.
Thank you very much for coming in, Mary.
Great to see you again, Mary.
This is always so fun. It's fun to visit with a great plant person like Don. And it sounds like you're really getting into the gardening too.
I am. And so for people, Don, who have questions about bringing plants inside, if they want to or if there anything to keep up on or to keep bugs away, people have questions, how should they reach you?
The best way is to email me, donald.kinzler, Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And if anyone else is growing a clivia, send me a photo. I might use it in the paper.
Okay.
We'd love to see that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next week. Mary, thanks again for coming by, and we'll have you on again.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Mary.
Okay.
Have a good week, everyone.